Welcome to the Loyal Opposition Podcast. I'm Bernie Flowers, one of Uncle Sam's wayward sons, here to help you sort through the chaos and keep it real for America's middle class. With that said, my good friend, Coach Tony DeCesare, is our returning champion to the show. We haven't talked in about a year, at least on the air, but he's a great guy, and I know you will love what he has to say. First, Tony, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Bernie. Thanks for having me on.
Man, I appreciate you coming on. We get along so well and we see things the same way. So I figured everybody ought to hear our conversation. How's Kara doing?
Doing great. Doing fantastic. Boys are good. How about you on your end?
Man, everything's good, man. That's I'm blessed. That's all I can say. I'm totally blessed. Well, look, can you tell the folks about your background and why it's so important that you're on this show right now?
We don't have enough time, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it. So, why don't we go back to where we met,
There you go.
which was like during COVID. So, I got involved with a grassroots organization, small little group of people meeting during COVID. It started in people's basements to begin with, and then it sort of mushroomed into public venues and restaurants and things like that. And you were running for Congress at the time, and
I was.
we invited you to come out and speak to us, and everybody loved that. That was a good time. Um, but that grassroots effort sort of exploded, and I was never very political, about anything. But I was also very naive, and I was very uneducated, and I didn't know what was really going on. And I think that COVID experience woke up a lot of people, not just me. Obviously,
Oh yeah.
the conversations that we have had over the
Yeah.
years, the things that you've enlightened me about. But I got involved, and fast forward 2 years later, you and I end up uh, being nominated to run for the MD GOP together,
Yes, we
which
did.
a very quick journey in a 2 year time period. So that didn't work out. That's a story for another day. But since then, that relationship and the movement that's been created has just mushroomed and it's grown. Um, it just impresses me more and more every day, thinking back about the fact that we started out with a karaoke machine and a microphone in a corner of a bar with a handful of people. It has now grown into, thousands of people, I mean, across the state. It's just absolute. We're very fortunate and blessed. We have great leadership and good people behind us. So that's kind of how this whole thing came together.
Yeah, the Patriot Club of Maryland, right?
Patriot Club of America.
There you
Yep,
go.
started out as a tiny little handful of people, and you know how big it is now.
Oh yeah.
It's gotten much bigger, and our network continues to grow every day. So that being said, I just want to go back to our last conversation when I was on the podcast before, and for those who hadn't seen that episode, we were discussing the 338 potential new taxes that were going to be imposed during the legislative session. Now, that was kind of a long conversation, and nothing had been etched in stone. There was, you know, still a lot of hypothetical stuff going on. But what's happened now, picking up from that conversation from last year, is that we've actually seen a lot of this come to fruition.
You could say
And
that again.
you're seeing the failure, and I'm not going to pin this on one person. Obviously, Wes Moore has done a phenomenal job tanking this thing. Um, and I do think that the fish rots from the head down. So there's something to be said about that. But we had talked about these 338 taxes and how they were going to impact the people of Maryland. And now it's happening. And
Yeah.
everybody's sort of looking at each other going, hey, wait, well, we didn't vote for that. We don't want those taxes, right? And the state went from a $5 billion surplus when Westmore was elected into office, and now it's running at a $3 billion deficit and growing.
Insane.
So, we're wrapping up the legislative session. Since they have a supermajority in Annapolis, they can pretty much do whatever they want. And I just honestly think that people are sick and tired of being beat over the head, okay, by the bureaucrats that just keep pounding and pounding and pounding away at the citizens of Maryland. So, I've been spending a lot of time looking into this and researching it, going to meetings and listening to a lot of the leaders in the field, elected representatives, people from the utility industry, things along those lines. And all you can say is you couldn't put together so many failures at one time. You couldn't. Let's go first and foremost, let's talk about Maryland in general.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a study that was done by United Van Lines. And United Van Lines tracks where people move based on the contracts that they receive, for these homeowners.
Right.
Well, 53% of the people that moved last year moved out of state. They left.
Not good.
No. So, and we've had these discussions like, hey, when do we pull the ripcord? Because what's happened is this: they're talking about increasing the taxes on the people with high disposable income, high net worth earners. Okay, they're gone. Anybody with a means to get out of here is already gone. They've left. Okay, they may snowbird it and then have a place back here or whatever, but they're smart enough to know we're not sticking around for this. So
Right.
they're out of here. So who's left holding the bag? It's the middle class and the working class of the state that's got to hold up everything. And those are the people that are being impacted by all those taxes. And, we talk about taxes and they're like, well, we're only going to pass a handful here and a handful there. What they don't tell you is that they're going to go ahead and increase your MVA fees to register your car,
Yep.
to renew your driver's license,
Yep.
your tolls. Okay, these are things that impact people every single day.
Right.
Now, the people that moved out of state, they asked them, well, why did you move out of Maryland? There was a survey, and it just so happens I have those results of that survey. And number one, I thought it would have been taxes because it's ridiculous here, but it was actually job opportunities. And I read the report, or I read the survey about the job opportunities, and then I thought about it for a second. And a week or so ago, McCormick Spice, which has been in Maryland for ever and ever and ever, their headquarters has always been here.
Right.
They knew about the taxes that were going to get pushed down their throat. And they said, look, if this goes through, we're out of here. Well, sure enough, they did it. They pushed the budget through. I mean, it's not etched in stone yet. It's still over on the Senate side, but it's going to happen, right? So you're losing these large corporate entities, and they're moving to other places, and they're taking their people with them. The funny thing about McCormick, I happened to be up near the McCormick headquarters one day, and there's a little shortcut, and I cut through the parking lot. And when you go through there, because so McCormick's headquarters is only about 30 minutes from the PA line. It's in Hunt Valley, Maryland.
Yeah.
So you can bounce right up to Shrewsbury, Pennsylvania, right across the line, where taxes are much better. And you go through the parking lot there and just start counting the number of license plates from PA. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but a large percentage of their workforce comes down from PA and then heads back up there to get away from it.
Yeah.
So you look at McCormick, and they're talking about leaving, and the state legislature, what do? Right over the head. We don't care. Raise the taxes. Okay. Procter and Gamble, who was in Hunt Valley, they did the same thing. They moved out to it's a place called Tabler Station out in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Cost of living is like half of what it is here. The taxes are like half of what they are here. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Okay. But what was the last large company to move their headquarters to Maryland?
I can't think of it.
You can't, because there isn't one.
Yeah.
No one's moving their headquarters here. Okay. And you look at the amount of empty commercial real estate, and just in my area, you can go out to Western Maryland in places like Hagerstown, which is closer to West Virginia,
Yeah.
and they're 6 miles from the line. You move your business across the street, and you're basically saving money every single day. They
Yeah.
don't attract. They don't attract business here. They
No, they
don't want
don't.
to attract businesses here. Okay. I mean, when they talk about improving or adding jobs to the economy, under the Hogan administration, who was a Republican, by the way, he he reduced the number of state employees. It was by about 2,000 employees.
Right.
Westmore's been in office. He hasn't even finished his first term, and he's already increased the number of state employees by 5,000.
That's absolutely insane. Oh, and by the way, they were supposed to bring the new FBI headquarters here to Maryland. And also, there was another major entity, I think Bureau of Engraving or something like that, was supposed to. And basically, they're not coming.
No,
We're losing jobs like crazy. And as you are alluding to, who's going to pay the taxes? Who's going to keep this thing going?
no, they're not. There's no economic development plan.
No.
Okay. I mean, so why would any corporation want to move here? There's no incentive for them to move here. Everything, it's funny. So I have a friend of mine, and he's in the commercial construction industry. And he told me years ago, he said, if you want to see economic opportunity, he said, look for piles of dirt. And I said, piles of dirt. He said, yeah. He says, when they're building things, the economy is expanding. And he
Mhm.
said, and after you see those piles of dirt, you'll see cranes. When you see cranes going up, you're seeing even larger economic opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. He said, but when you drive around and you see plywood on the windows, that's a contracting economy. It's not getting any bigger.
I,
Okay.
I see
And
a lot of plywood in Baltimore.
there's a lot of plywood in Baltimore. But the conversation I had with him was, he started in Philadelphia. He was on
Yeah.
a trip. He was in Philadelphia, no piles of dirt, no construction. He's in the inner city. He was heading south, and he said, you get past like Richmond, Virginia, and as you go down, and you're from North Carolina, so you know
Yeah.
this stuff too.
Right.
He's like, all the construction, all the economic expansion and opportunity is all where now?
Down south.
It's all down south. They attract all those people. They have little to no state taxes down there.
Yep.
Okay. They want small businesses. They want corporate headquarters there. They attract that kind of stuff. Our governor wants to get his picture taken at the University of Maryland basketball game.
Oh my goodness. This guy wants to be president. We can't let this happen. Can't let it happen. But anyway,
50, well, hold on, wait a minute. 53% of the people think it's so bad they want to leave. Who's going
yeah.
to vote this guy into office with his numbers?
Crazier things have happened, but we got to stand strong and try to put a stop to this. But right now we got to survive. And let me ask you, with all that having to do with, building, what about the energy prices here? You know, as I read, things seem to be going up like crazy, and it's not going up in West Virginia, it's not going up in Virginia, not going up
Yeah.
in Pennsylvania, but we seem to be bearing the brunt of this. And I just don't understand why we're operating in such a stupid fashion.
I'm gonna give you a great quote that I heard the other day. Okay, and it's about green energy. And
Yeah.
the comment was, we need to transition to green energy at the pace of technology, not at the pace of government.
Yeah.
Okay. And I thought about that.
Yeah.
And the most important part there is that we have a group of people in this state that decided it was going to be a good idea to shut down a coal fired power plant. Okay. We're going to go transition to green energy. They had nothing to replace it. So I'm digging around the other day. Sorry. And I find this article, and it says the Maryland Public Policy Institute sounds alarm as coal plant shutdown threatens power for millions.
Yeah.
Federal energy regulators said coal plant closure could be potentially catastrophic. So it's kind of like selling your car and not having another one, okay? And waking up the next day saying, how am I going to get to work? Right? This is what these people do. They're like, we're going to get rid of coal-fired power plants. What are you going to replace it with? We don't know.
They haven't thought about it.
So the original comment that they said was it's going to increase your energy bill by 5%. Now, my energy bill did not increase by 5%. Did yours?
No,
No.
went up.
Yeah, it went up a lot, and
Yeah.
it's going to go up again. Wait for
Yeah.
these people. Wait until everybody sees their energy bills this summer. Okay,
Yeah.
when that price increase kicks in, and they're trying to run their AC. There was a
Yeah.
gentleman I heard speak a few weeks ago saying, as an energy consultant, Maryland will probably see brownouts this summer. Brownouts.
Sounds like
Now,
California to me, bro.
bingo,
That's
bingo.
what they're doing to us, turning us into California.
But I'm going to tell you, here's the thing that's important about this. There's there's a shift, and you've seen it, and I've seen it, and we've talked about this multiple times, but there's a shift right now in the 18 to 25-year-old age group.
Yeah.
And these kids are going, wait a minute, hold on. See, it all started with COVID with these kids. And you
Yeah.
got to remember the 18-year-olds now, well, they were in middle school when all that COVID nonsense went on. So they had to live through that, right? They're getting ready to go to college or whatever, interrupted their education,
Yep.
right? Getting beat over the head by the government again. But they decide, okay, well, I'm going to go to school now, and now they got to pay for it. But you're going to go ahead and have to take out a student loan, and it's going to cost you X amount of money, or whatever it may be. And they're going, that seems like a lot of money to me. Because when you and I went to college, it was like you go to college, you get an education,
Yeah.
and you enter the workforce. And it was actually affordable. Cost of tuition after 2000 went through the roof. They opened up the floodgates on the money, right, for the student loan program.
Yeah.
And these kids signed their life away, with $100,000 in debt before they've even graduated. So, the Great Awakening is in that age group. That Gen Z population now, they're going, all right, we've had enough. Can't buy a house. It's too expensive. Throttled with debt. They've seen what the government has done as far as regulation. They're like, we need to go in another direction. And that's what happened in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
2024. All those people that voted, that flipped that state to red, they were the 18 to 25-year olds. They were the ones, you had Scott Pressler up there registering voters, and you had Cliff Maloney. By the way, he'll be at our Patriot Club event in May. You
I'll
know,
be there too.
looking forward to it.
All
But
right,
they
brother.
they realized that that was the sweet spot, and those kids, I shouldn't say kids, but those young adults, they're looking around and saying, "Nah, we're not buying this."
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what happened is that they misread the landscape. When I say they, I'm talking about the other side,
Yeah.
because none of those kids, young adults, own a television. I think like 10% of them have cable TV,
Right.
right?
Cut the
Because
cord.
look, it's this thing right here. This is what everything that they learn comes
Yeah.
off of this thing right here. It's TikTok, it's YouTube. I got 20-year-old kids, same story, right?
Yeah.
That's how they get their information. And that's how things are going to have to change moving forward. But getting back to the utility thing, I don't know what they're going to do this summer. That's going to be a major problem. And there's an election year coming up. So we're going to
Yeah.
see how that tends to move the needle.
Well, let me ask you, man. You were hinting around at the young people having a different way of looking at politics, and our state is out of touch with the rest of the nation with the Trump revolution going on right now. My question to you, let's talk a little bit more how we're going to turn Maryland around if we stay here.
It's so they call it like a blue wall state, I guess,
Yeah,
or whatever. Um, you have to remember the number of federal and state employees that reside here.
yeah,
Northern Virginia is the same exact thing. It's the same exact way. And I'm not just talking about the federal employees. I'm talking about all that periphery stuff that goes on with the
the
lobbyists.
contractors and all that. Yeah,
They're all there, right? They're protecting their own. That's kind of how it is. So the turnaround, in my view, is going to be a 10-year turnaround. It's not going to be in one election cycle like it was in Pennsylvania. I'm almost I hate to say this, but like when that energy thing happens and the power starts going to these brownouts and everyone's bill is through the roof,
yeah.
that's going to be something that's going to move the needle. If it doesn't move the needle in Maryland, then those people are moving from Maryland. I mean, I don't think you're going to see a lot of people sticking around or voting the same way if this situation continues much longer. They can't. I mean, we've got economic problems. We've got a school system that is one of the worst in the country.
Yeah, I
It's
was going
one
to
of the
ask you about that.
well, we spend more money per pupil, right? I mean, that was even mentioned in the survey that the United Van Lines
Yeah.
survey, and it said in 2016 it was discovered out of every school district, Baltimore, in Baltimore, talking about Baltimore City, there were no students who tested proficient on any state exam.
Insane.
So, what is the answer to the problem? How do they fix this? You know, at the government level, it's always the same. Well, let's throw more money at it. If we throw more money at it, everything will be fine.
Not
No,
working, bro. It's not working.
no. So you've got a failing school system. I mean, these are all things that have been outlined. You've got a crime situation in this state that's, I mean, it's we're notorious for it. It's like one of the things that Baltimore is known for. It's funny when I travel around and people say, "Hey, where are you from?" I'm like Baltimore. They're like, "Oh, we're good. You know,
Yeah.
we Baltimore. Oh, we're good.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on that guy." You know, so you have that insane crime rate, and then you have the legislature that puts in these laws that lets the juveniles continue to do it. So when they get caught, they don't prosecute them; they let them back out again, so that they can go ahead and you know perform more crime or whatever it
Yeah.
may be, right?
Yeah.
That part of it, the crime part of it, is what trickles down into things that impact people that aren't necessarily a part of the state regulating things or Westmore, you know, hiring more people, whatever it may be. It's the out of pocket expenses. So all the stolen cars. Now I got my insurance premium for my car. My insurance premium increased for 2025,
Right.
and it increased a lot. And I called my guy up and I said, "Hey, whoa, what's up? This isn't normal." He's like, "This is all I do all day long. I just answer the phone when people get these premium increases and tell them the same exact thing." He's like, "I just repeat myself constantly. All the stolen cars, okay, keep adding up and adding up and adding up, right?" Which
Yeah.
also, they're driving around, by the way, without insurance or a license in most cases. So, we just had about a mile from my house, we had a couple of teens that came up out of the city in a stolen car and they crashed it out in front of a school.
Yeah.
So, um, there's another insurance claim there. But, the rising cost of insurance, the inflation on top of that, these are all things that are sort of on the periphery. Um, how do you turn the state around? Well, you've got to get those people out of office that are voting for these things. That's a good example. We have a voter integrity bill that gets presented every single year
Yeah.
in Annapolis. It goes to committee. It sits in a drawer and they don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
All we're saying is voter ID. We just want voter ID and signature verification. And they don't even pull it out of the drawer to vote on it in committee, to get it to the floor, to even discuss it. Now, that was that became, I don't know, I guess Trump negated that with the executive order
I
on
was
their,
going to ask you about that. Keep on talking,
well,
bro.
so here we go again. So Trump signs an executive order and says, got to be a citizen, got to have voter ID. State Board of Elections supervisor, the guy that's in charge, sends out a statement saying, "We're going to look into this further because this really could cause some problems with like election misinformation, malinformation. It could dramatically impact, people serving overseas and
Oh,
so on and so forth." Right? These things need to go away.
yeah.
Right? All of them, all these little, and here's what I say to them. It's just like in sports, right? That's foul play. In foul play, we give them a yellow card.
There you go.
Out you go, right? Send them packing. But no, what happens is they keep pushing the same people through, right? Again and again and again. If you don't put new blood in there, I mean, even just to get rid of the supermajority, to have a civil conversation, because these the Republicans in Maryland get up there and they fight for these things, knowing full well no one's listening to them, and in the end, they're just going to push through whatever they want because there's nothing you can do about it because they have the supermajority. And who gets impacted the most? The citizen of Maryland. If you go out on the street tomorrow and you just poll people and say, "Hey, you know, aren't you glad we got all these new taxes?" People are going to look at you like you're insane. You know,
Yeah.
nobody wants this stuff. But that's where give up on the back end, the top end. I'm sorry. Okay, these people that have been ingrained with their feet cemented into that party politics stuff, you're never going to change them.
No.
Abandoned ship. 18 to 25-year olds, they're looking around and asking a lot of questions, going, I don't believe in any of this. I mean, not
Yeah.
that it's a D or an R or a blue or a red or whatever. They just want to get what their parents had the opportunity to have. I tell my kids all the time stories like, I picked up one year and just traveled across the country. And they're
Yeah.
like, without a cell phone? I'm like, yeah, and no GPS. We had a map, right? And they think about that like it's the wild, wild west. Like that must have been crazy.
It was
It's
only a
just
few years ago. I mean, I traveled all over Europe. I had no cell phone. They weren't invented. So hell, man.
great. Use a
So
map, right? It was pretty simple
crazy.
stuff.
Crazy.
But that age group is the age group that I think deserves the attention.
Totally
And
agree.
because the beauty of that, and I've had these conversations with that age group. I'm around these 18 to 25-year olds all the time. Um, that conversation, they listen.
Yeah.
They're not the people who have had their feet cemented into that party politics thing forever. They don't listen to a word you say. They dig in deeper, right? But it's like, hey, you know, you want to buy a house by the time you're 25? Well, this is what it's going to cost. My older son's in real estate. He said, yeah, like the average person needs like 70 grand to get into a new house in this area, right?
Yeah.
70 grand. I
Who's
mean,
got that? Or as a kid.
well, you're coming out of college with $100,000 in debt, and
Yeah.
now you need to come up with 70 grand to buy a house. So I think that's where we really need to focus on that group of people. And I'm going to give credit to a lot of people. I'm going to give it to, um, for what it's worth, Charlie Kirk, what he did at Turning Point USA and the events
Yeah.
that he puts on. That guy is like crushing it. Um, and
You
it
know,
goes across the board.
I watch him all the time. And the cool thing about it, he is very proud of the fact that he doesn't have a formal college education. And he goes on to college campuses and literally enlightens college graduates. And I just think it's so cool. That guy's so confident and it's just fun to watch.
And I mean, he needs like full-time security
Yeah.
because they're just they're
Indoctrinated.
wackos, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Crazy as hell.
indoctrinated. Like they just cannot think for themselves, but there are. That's the beauty of it, is that
Yeah.
there's more and more and more. I can't remember what the percentage was when the male 18 to 25 in Pennsylvania, but it was super high.
Yeah.
Like this guy said, we've had enough of this. We don't want any
Yeah.
more of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have a lot of hope for Maryland. I know there's a lot of new leadership. You and I know these people.
Yeah.
A lot of good things happening in the background in Maryland.
Mhm.
Um, we're sort of in our twilight years, so we need to find that next layer of the onion, so to speak, to get these
Well,
get these kids get
I
these
still
kids
got a
up and
few
running.
years on you, brother. I mean, you got a lot of goodness left in you, and you're fighting behind the scenes doing a lot of good things. That's why I keep having to ask you to come on this thing because you got the pulse, bro.
Well, I travel in a lot of different circles. To put
Yeah.
it to you like that. So I see a lot of different, a lot of different things, a lot of different people. Again, I was never political. And there was a comment I heard it at CPAC a few years ago. I think you were there that year. I think you were there. I actually ran into you. That was
Yeah, we
the year
got
before
pictures of
that.
us together.
Oh yeah, that was great. It was a good time. And there was a guy who was being interviewed, and he said, "I had a friend of mine whose son said, I'm not very political." And he said, well, you should be.
Yeah.
because that's your future. And I felt so bad because I I was that guy because I wasn't, and I was way down the road before I opened up my eyes and went, "What?" It took me getting beat over the head with COVID,
Yeah.
watching my friends' businesses shut down, watching my kids' education basically come to a halt. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of other issues too, but that's when I decided, yeah, I need to start thinking about this. And I was literally, before I went to that first Patriot Club meeting, I flew to Florida with my son, and he was going to enroll in school in Florida. This is like during COVID. Uh,
Right.
had a mover, had everything ready, packed and ready to go. And went to this Patriot Club meeting. Some other extenuating circumstances happened as far as my wife's mother's health, so we had to stick around. And I said, you know what? I want to stay. I want to see what happens. I want to be here the whole way through this. And it was interesting because they always say, like, sit at the table with warriors, the conversation is different.
Yeah.
That's what changed, is that I got to sit at that table. And you were one of those people at that table when I heard you speak for the first time. And I said, actually, I think we endorsed you when you ran.
You
And I was
did.
like, that's the guy right there. I'm like, that's your dude. You let's tie our horse to him because he knows, because you knew so much. I mean,
Yeah.
I had no idea that you worked for the government, that you were behind the fence, that you worked for Alexander Mayorkas. Come on,
That dude needs to go to jail, but that's another story for another time, man.
at least go to jail for
Yes.
sure. But yeah, I mean, I love coming on here. I love talking about this stuff. I think that Maryland is salvageable. I think that we've got a great group of people. You've done some Leadership Institute training courses,
Great
as
people.
I learn more and more, like every single day,
Yeah.
about the strategy of how these things work. I think for 2026, the 18 to 25-year-olds is where we focus. And I keep telling people that school board races are your number one priority for
Yeah.
2026. You have got to focus on fixing the school system.
Totally agree. This blueprint thing, and I've kept you up here a while, but if you want to talk about it, it's up to you. But this blueprint thing is out of control, and you are definitely correct. The school board is the way to focus, but I'm talking, and people need to listen to you.
So I go to school board meetings. I speak at school board meetings. I asked the superintendent of Baltimore County Public Schools to resign. It wasn't the last time, but before he left, before he
Yeah,
resigned, I was the first person to say, "You need to resign. We're done. You're out." I mean, we had a
yeah,
violence problem in the school system. It was all over TikTok and Instagram, and I mean, Baltimore County Schools was like world famous for this. Shout out to Darren Badillo, by the way, because he kept track of all that stuff.
totally
And
good guy.
great guy. He filtered all that information and set up like a spreadsheet and sent it out to everybody so that we could keep track of which schools were actually getting, dinged with this
Yeah,
violence. He kind of fed me some stuff for that school board meeting. But when you go to these school board meetings, and you kind of listen, you don't have to participate. You can just sit there and listen, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, the bureaucracy. I live in a county with a $3 billion school budget.
wow.
Okay. Prior to COVID, it was 2 point something billion. It's basically the same number of kids.
What are we
We're,
getting for all this BS that they're doing?
well, my point being is that if we had an influx of kids and we needed to build new schools, we had to hire new teachers or whatever, then I can see the need for the budget increase. But you don't increase, you know, the budget by $1 billion in a handful of years for no reason. I mean, what they're doing is the school boards are growing the bureaucracy. So there are these administrative positions that we're going to invent this administrative positions. And then listen, all these people run in the same circles.
Yeah,
These jobs, they're giving these jobs to their friends and their colleagues and their work buddies and things like that. In my county, I looked at the budget. there's I forget the total number of administrative people. It's like we'll just say 100. I might be wrong, but I remembered that being a three-digit number. The average pay is like $216,000 a year.
Great God.
Yeah, my point is the money needs to be focused on the kids and the teachers,
Yeah.
and it's not. That's why I keep pounding into people like pay attention to the school board, like get the right people on the school board. And
Yeah.
that's 2026, right? 18 to 25-year-olds, and you've got to get these school boards back in order because the teachers unions have completely lost control.
Dude, I was about to ask you questions about the teachers union, but here's the thing. I've already had you on here for 30 minutes and we could go for 2 hours very easy. So I'm going to have to ask you to come back at some point. But right
Absolutely.
now, I want to ask you to just whatever's on your mind, whatever's important to you, I'm going to step away. The floor is now yours.
This might take another 30 minutes.
Let's roll, baby.
No, it's interesting because we do get the opportunity to run in different circles and some of the same circles. And I will say that over the last 2 or 3 months, that the movement or the momentum that we have now is gaining more speed. It's getting back to common sense principles. It's getting back to, the things that we had when we were younger. And the fact that we have 20-year-old children that listen to the stories that we grew up, doing at their age. And it's kind of like nostalgic, and they want that. That's what they want.
Yeah.
They want to go back to that. So I think about it a lot. I think about this a tremendous amount, and I will go out of my way to talk to a 18 to 25-year-old, right? If there's a room full of people, I'm automatically for some reason that age group tends to listen to me. I have no idea why, but
Well, that's why they
um,
call you coach, bro.
I coached a lot of kids, that's for sure. But I do end up in those circles, and the one thing I will say is that there was a in that age group because they were that cancel culture thing. Um, it was just so bad for a while for all of them.
Yeah.
It put fear into them or whatever. And I'm like, what are you going to do? Worry about something that was on the internet for like the rest of your life? I'm like, who cares? Like, get a backbone. Get off of the internet, right? Get off of social media.
Yeah.
And I really think that if we invest our time and you look at that generation right now, because the one thing that they need is leadership, and there is a vacuum of that right now.
Yeah.
They're looking for that mentor. They're looking for somebody that can kind of say, hey, listen, you know, here's what I think you need to do. And it doesn't matter what it is, but they will listen to that. And that's what people like you and I, um, we need to spread that word. I keep saying, like, we just have to keep planting those seeds. It'll grow, but it just seems to be growing a lot faster right now. And
Yeah.
the thing that caught my eye to that was I think it was North Carolina. The protest at North Carolina. I can't remember what
Yeah.
it
It was
was, but
UNC.
the frat boys with the flag.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And they stood there, and those guys they were trying to rip the flag down, and they stood there and just took water bottle after water bottle, people throwing stuff, and they didn't leave. They
Yeah.
stayed, and they would not let them rip that flag down. I thought, I think we're going in the right direction now. It's kind of like turning a cruise ship, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, now I think it's turning a lot faster, and I think
I
we're
would
doing
agree.
all the right stuff. Hey, listen, I appreciate you having me on. I'll always come back for you. I mean, even on a Sunday night in
Well,
my
brother,
informal wear.
you're the man, and you've become one of my favorite people. You know that. And yes, we will have you back on here because you got insights that a lot of people don't even understand. And you are so humble about this thing. You work behind the scenes. A lot of people don't know your name, but I'm going to make sure that everybody knows who Coach Tony DeCesare is. So
All
you
right. I
you keep doing
appreciate
what you're
it.
doing.
All right, buddy.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Brian.
Well,
Take care.
Well, with that said, folks, that's about it for today. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe, and share this with your friends. And remember, it's okay to disagree, but if we want our country to prosper, we've got to insist on unity, transparency, and civility from ourselves and our fellow citizens. I'd like to hear your opinion, so if you have time, drop me a line when you get a chance. Otherwise, stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay free.